west. So we're only going 1 mile, and then we're gonna, kind of depending on some time and whatnot. I didn't realize it was a coach bus that was coming, so we're gonna do a little bit of modifications to what we're gonna go see. But we're gonna go 1 mile north, look at a couple things. We'll stop back here for a pit stop, and you guys can use the bathroom one more time. And then there's one spot. I just want to show you guys some sandhills pasture. We won't be able to look at cattle, but we'll stop on the way back. It's just off the highway. We'll just climb up the hill, and you guys can just see what the sandhills look like, because it is fairly unique. So that's kind of the plan.
Okay, cool.
And we're dealing with mud holes. You guys probably saw that the playas are full, which, first time in a few years. So we're gonna reroute us around a little bit. We're gonna cut across this wheat field here that it was harvested with the Shelburne stripper header. I'm sure you guys utilize that in your county. That's one of those practices that we went to 5 or 6 years ago, and for our dry land system where residue is so important, the more residue you can leave there, the better, and it's been a real good change for us. Straight ahead, and we're going to walk into that field, but that's our warm season cover crop mix.
Follow him?
Yep, just follow him. And when you drive by, and we're going to walk into that warm season cover crop mix, but when you look at it, it looks like it's just a single species, but there are 8 or 9 different species in there. And the reason it always seems to look like a monoculture from the road is we use 5 or 6 different types of sorghum sudan grasses and millets, pearl millet, and it always is perfect for one of those species, and that species tends to dominate it, and it kind of looks like a monocrop.
Do you use any turnips or radishes or anything in any mix?
Yes, the question was, do we use turnips or radishes in our mixes? Yet we do use both of those. I use it at a very limited rate because I'm fairly concerned about the cost per acre. And for some reason, last year, they were everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Like every square yard had a brassica on it, and it was unique in that that was the only year I've ever seen them really take off. If you walk and look, you'll find one. But man, last year for some reason you were just tripping over it.
Off-road in the tour bus. I mean, hey, heck yeah. That's the follow.
So this is right ahead of us is going to be the heifers that are replacement heifers. Yeah, just wait for him though. I don't know what he's doing. There's some mud holes up there, and I want to make sure we avoid them. Yeah, let Jewell get us up ahead. Yeah, we're gonna go. We'll come out here and look at our replacement heifers. They're all in for water for the day, so we'll be able to see them.
Oh, it wasn't ours.
Oh, I thought that was yours.
And then to the right, between those two fields, is one of our prairie strips. So it's just so we have some more, and that's all native grass. We sprayed that out 2 or 3 years ago. Every 7 years, you need to re-drill it and re-up it. So 2 years ago, we sprayed it out and re-drilled it to the natives.
Just that saddle horse pretty quickly around.
So why do you have to spray out your natives?
With the CRP program, they make you, from a management standpoint, re-drill every 7 years. It's just part of their program.
It's different than ours now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've never.
As far as I know, it is a reason to sell grass seed.
I was like, why would you kill a native grass seed?
Absolutely not.
Maybe I was with my father. I never heard of that in my life. Hell, I worked for NRCS for 34 years.
Really?
Never heard of it.
Every 7
Right.
years in Nebraska.
Well, they like it feeding for the birds.
Huh?
They like it feeding for the birds.
I get
and
that,
wildlife
but-
parks does. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's it.
Got on the
They put their person about better than bosses on your tour.
Oh, yeah.
Is this good enough
Yep,
here?
this is perfect.
They're like, hey, how's it going?
So this odd thing should bring us something, a snack.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Yeah, you gotta love the optimism of cattle. Maybe there's hay in there.
Yeah.
Something.
A couple of them got their nose up in the air. It won't be long. It's a lot of people.
Yeah. Hi, girls.
Thing. So they were exposed for 40 days. What we will do is we'll ultrasound preg check them and we'll split them up into 2 cycles. So that we've got the early cycle in one management group and then the late cycle in the other management group. That allows you to keep those later ones out on corn stalks a little bit longer, and you just don't need to look after them. But
You able to run on corn stalks up until you about need to
our
come
own
home?
corn stalks,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
We do work with some bigger farmers that farm large acres, and we pay them extra so we can graze those until April.
Okay.
So in this part of the world, they want you off by March 1, but we work with a number of guys that farm so many quarters that they're not even going to be able to see these. So we pay just a couple bucks an acre extra, and we graze those until April. And then we graze our own corn stalks when we have them in the month of April and into May.
What do you have to give for corn stalk grazing?
So it's the only ones that we will rent is irrigated. We don't rent any dry land because there's so much flexibility with the dry land. The nice thing about the irrigated corn stalk is during a drought you really know what you're going to get, and it's the same as a good year, and it'd be 20 bucks an acre, which is higher than. There are a lot of cattle in southwest Nebraska, and people bring cattle in from Wyoming and Colorado, and this is kind of the closest you can get to stock. So there is good demand for it.
What's the irrigated corn yield like in this area, I
Sure.
guess?
A good irrigated corn yield would be really good. Be 250. I think their management is like 220. I think is what they manage for.
You have quite a bit of stover to clean up then.
Yeah, it is quite a bit. You can run on 1 acre. You can run 1 cow for 2 months, 1 dry cow. So it is pretty good. And then we'll also some years, and the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna walk over and look at our warm season mix over there, and then we are gonna go drive. You can kind of see that hilltop right over there. You can't really see it, but it's off in the distance, and that's where we have some more of our seeded stock. But so it's not quite 1,000. There are a couple steers in here just because they got sorted off. The orange tags are steers, but this is 925 replacement heifers, and they are grazing. There's a quarter of corn that we're grazing. We can walk up there and go look at it and see what they're grazing for. But they're on 80 acres right now. Kind of like I said before, the corn, it looks fine, but it was really a pollination and disease thing that made the ears look terrible. But we do side dress application all of our crops as needed. We did not side dress this year. We test everything that we graze every month. So if we're on corn stalks, we test corn stalks. If we're on the range, we test range. We always want to know what the quality is and if there are any variances from year to year. So I tested this for nitrates. The nitrates came in at less than 200, and like management starts to come into effect at about 1,000 is when you need to start thinking about it with the way that they test the nitrates. I have side dressed and grazed corn before. You can do that. I have been told by neighbors that their nitrates are too high to graze corn, so we have never ever had nitrates too high, and we've been grazing corn forever. We do, and I think you guys on a tour like this, our nitrogen application isn't 1-to-1 on corn. In a no-till cover crop grazing system, it's closer to a half unit of nitrogen per bushel of expected production. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think you have a lot of farmers that nitrogen in some quantities is not a bad thing. A lot of nitrogen is a bad thing for the plant, for the ground, for the downstream people. And I think a lot of farmers have in their head, it's like, oh, fertilizer is good. And it certainly is in some levels, but there is too much of a good thing. And I think when people talk about, you can't graze this, you can't graze that, I think, if you apply a bunch of nitrogen, like in a dryland system where it's like, I've grown 150 bushel corn here, and if I planned on every year growing 150 bushel corn and putting 150 units of nitrogen, yeah, real soon you're going to run into some nitrate troubles. But the way that we manage here, it has not been a problem.
What's your soil organic matter percentage in this part of the area?
Sure, we lost some ground in the last 4 years on soil organic matter. It is typically 1 point. This is sand. A typical field would be 1, basically. With the cover crops and the no-till farming, we got it to where it was knocking on the door at 2%. But the last 4 years of the drought, it took us, we're like 1.5 or so. That's not impressive. If you go to Gabe Brown's place, or these guys that have been doing it for decades, I mean, they're like 4 or 5, and I don't know about 6, but I mean, you can get really impressive. I think that, and you guys, maybe you chose to come to Southwest Nebraska because we have a lot of the same issues where you guys fight that clay. It's the same thing here, that's sand. I mean, what we're standing on right now is primarily Valent sand is what it is. It'd be 80% Valent sand, and Valent sand is the sand dunes of the sand hills. So I mean, it's if it was dry, you'd be able to see it a little bit better. But I mean, it is like the beach sand, like the sand you can picture on the shores. That is the soil type that we're on. But I do expect that to slowly improve, and especially if we get a run of wet years. We had a really nice run of wet years from 15 to 18, and I think we're going to be due for one again, and that kind of gets us the momentum we need to bank that soil organic matter.
Do you only graze like these shortbred heifers and open heifers on this corn, or do you do cows on the corn too?
We don't generally. We have done cows on the corn. The only reason that we try to run yearlings on the corn is just because they're going to put on, they should be doing about a 3.0 average daily gain. And these opens will sell in about a month. And so when I graze the corn with these, it turns to cash quicker, right? If I graze corn with the pairs, it's like the calf may be a little bit bigger. The cow's going to get bigger, but that doesn't immediately translate to cash flow. So when we do graze cover crops, corn or things like that, if we have a yearling, we're going to put a yearling out there.
What stage did you start grazing the corn, I guess?
Sure. The trigger to graze was really a reflection of price and harvesting cost, and also like expected yield. So we were a little late to do it. It was setting in year, basically. Pretty ugly year. I got a picture of some ears if you want to see it. It was fairly late for grazing. If we had known earlier, I would have liked to start it at tassel, basically. But I don't think it hurts too much. The first thing that these girls do when you turn them out, you got 1,000 on 80 acres, they go and eat all the ears off. They learn within. It's kind of funny. These girls never have grazed corn, and when you turn them out onto it, they're like, they're like, what is this? Like, you know, they're used to like short, you know, they're used to grass like this, and it's a uniform thing, and it's road. And like for the first day, they're like, this is the weirdest thing. And then, but as soon as they get their head down, and then they figure that they eat those ears, they'll eat all those ears first, and then they'll select for the leaves from about top to bottom, except for the ones that they really can't reach.
Guess this really doesn't have anything to do with here, but like, when do you wean? Later in the fall or about October?
We do try to wean early. I know a lot of good, progressive, smart thinking cattlemen that wean super late, and I think there is something to be said for both systems. If I was just on deeded ground, I would run pairs late, but all of our corn stalk grazing is corn ground west of Imperial, so it is, yeah, it's 15. We'll drive them there, but just logistically, it's just a pain to do with pairs. If my corn stalks were, you know, my next door, I would wean way later, but it's just nice to get them weaned, get them taken care of, and then get the cows to corn stalks, because we have to travel for the corn stalks. So I do think it's smart to wean late, but that being said, we'll wean in October every year. And the economics in Nebraska, and this is a little bit different than Kansas, is the pasture rent is such that it's double corn stalk rent. So a day that my cow is on native range is twice as much as a day that it's on corn stalks. So even shifting it by a couple weeks on either end really helps the bottom line on your cow budget. And I do think that is different for you guys. So you're not as incentivized to sort. Your pasture rents are a little bit more moderate, and your residue grazing, they're both pretty equal. That's the people that I've known, I've talked to from you guys there. Any other questions about the cattle?
Water systems for when you're grazing on crop, pipelines.
Yep. So
everywhere.
there's a 11-foot stock tank, exactly how we're talking about this. You know, in Nebraska, they're below, you know, about 150 feet below us. There's another 400 feet of water. So wherever we want water in Nebraska, you just put a hole in the ground and you get water, and it's a unique advantage. And all my friends in Kansas are always very jealous. But every ranch has a full pipeline system and easy to trench in the sand. So there's a hydrant over there and an 11-foot stock tank, and there's a 3-horse well at headquarters right there. And you know, our PSI can be 100. We can fill a tank in a minute. So water is just watering cattle. You know, in Nebraska, it's just water, and the water's so good too. I mean, it's just like Fiji. It's like the water that you'd buy at like the gas station water. So it's definitely been one of the advantages that we use. And it helps the cattle do well. It really does. That Emery Birdwell ranch that I've been on, it is not good water, and it does affect their health.
How are you keeping them open in the wintertime? Are you running heat there? Or?
You know what? If we do have a plug-in, we will run heat. But what we do is we just run water over. And so what we've done on our tanks is we'll build a little hole with a drain on it, and we'll just pump more water in and just keep it recirculating constantly. You did? All right. Well, I think we can walk over. We can go walk through that warm season cover crop now. This one plant, which is sorghum Sudan, is just dominating. But there are a bunch of millets, brassicas, and all sorts of good stuff in there. And like I said in the lodge, if we didn't have that corn, we would be grazing this, but the corn was ready to go. And one thing I did last year is we had a half section of this, and I grazed it with dry cows in late April and just let it sit all winter. And it worked out really well, and we actually had a blizzard when the cows were in this, and they just laid down and chewed their cud, and they got through it really good. So one of the things I really like about the warm season cover crops in particular is if I don't graze it now, it's going to be taking balling calves out here in November. They get along so well, and if there's ever a weather event or anything, all they got to do is lay down and they're fine. So this is my favorite cover crop to grow. This is the only cover crop we do every year, and it just works every year for us. And we can graze it in July, we can graze it in August, September, October, November, December, January, all the way through April. So it's very forgiving, and it's drought tolerant, and just conceptually, and you guys know this, but I'm just going to point it out. It's when you're in a drought. In 22, when we got 9 inches of rain for the year, it was about this tall, and really the only thing it provided was cover. We weren't able to graze any of our cover crops that year. Outside of that, I mean, even if we get 12, 13, or 14 inches, this thing is still going to be 12 foot tall by September 1st. And it's because we can grow, so I can go plant corn, and I can set my planter to 30,000 population, and it will look great. It'll look like a corn crop until you actually go in it, and the population's too high for Southwest Nebraska. Nothing will have an ear. So we have, where we are, or where you guys are as well, you get a little bit more water, but in some years you don't. We have the water to produce the vegetation. We just don't always have the water to produce the grain, which is about half. Half of, like in a cornfield, half the water is produce the plant matter, and the other half is to produce the grain. So 99 years out of 100, we have enough water to produce a very nice, thick cover crop. And on the grain side, where we're at, corn production is 8 out of 10. Probably is when you're going to have a harvestable crop. So it's a really nice, easy crop to grow. It makes you look good. This is the first cover crop I did. I could tell you guys a little bit how I got into it. My dad, I'd come back. I'd been farming for a little while, and cover cropping was kind of the thing people were talking about. And it was 2015, so I'd been back a few years, and I told my dad I wanted to try out a cover crop, and he's like, I don't think it'll work, on dryland production in Southwest Nebraska. He said, it's a good idea, but I personally don't think it'll work. So I went to the, and when I talked to my dad, and I said, well, let's try it on a half section, just to see. Went to the NRCS, they had dollars available to pay for the seed. So we were running the drill through one more time, and it wasn't cost prohibitive, and we went. It was into wheat stubble, and we drilled like an oat mix, and got it from Green Cover Seed. That's back when it was super expensive too. It was like $60 an acre. We drilled it, and we tried to graze it in April of the following year. And not only was it a failure on a farm scale, it was a failure on the ranch scale, because we tried to graze it with these cows that were calving. We had a rainstorm event where it rained 6 inches in 3 days, and the wind was blowing 40 miles an hour, and the high temperature was 35 degrees that April. Killed some cows, killed some calves, complete and total disaster. And my dad was absolutely right. He's like, well, see, cover crops won't work here. And I was like, well, let's give it one more try. So tried it again the next year, and kind of the same thing. It was, I tried it after wheat stubble, and you guys would be glad to know it was also a colossal failure. So right, two years, complete failure. You're thinking, all right, throw in the towel, right? No, I'm a rancher, right? I'm stubborn, right? We're talking about feed for the cattle. We're gonna make this work. And so the third year we did oats and peas into corn stalks, and that year it was a phenomenal success. We got like 80 steer days to an acre out of it. It saved us 2 herbicide applications. So it was between corn stalks and wheat, like what we're doing in that field south of the lodge. So it saved us 2 herbicide passes. It actually suppressed the weeds, right? Because, you know, you guys know, the farmers in the group know that herbicides aren't like they were 10 or 20 years ago. They are not as effective. And to kind of expound on that, I've got conventional neighbors that they'll grow oat pea mix into their dryland fallow corners on their pivots exclusively as a weed suppression tool. So they'll go out and they get to drill it in March, and they're not doing anything with their drill. They're not doing anything with their tractor. So they go out there and they drill it sometime in March, and it saves them 2 or 3 herbicide passes. They just do a termination on that in late July. They have the standing dead matter. They'll spray it maybe 1 more time, maybe 0 more times. And in a net, they're ahead because they're actually suppressing the weeds. And in our sand, they would say that maybe you're losing a little bit of water, but that argument does not go here. For example, if I were to dump our soil system, if I were to dump this out there, it's not going to stay there for 3 months. It's not going to stay there for 3 weeks. This is a sand ecosystem. What built the aquifer is the fact that this thing is going to be in the aquifer in a week at the most. So I don't buy into the fact that cover crops use moisture here. And I only know the sandhills ecosystem, so that's all I'll speak to. But I don't think that we're using any more moisture. But so the oat peas mix, a lot of people are doing it, even the conventional farmers. A lot of people like it. And then this fall in corn stalks. And in a typical dryland rotation in southwest Nebraska, this would be fallowed. So you would just work the ground 3 or 4 times that year, and then you drill wheat behind it. So this is kind of a fallow replacement. And like I said, it works great. You can utilize it whenever you want, and here it is.
So this was corn last year,
It's corn last year.
and this was planted when?
This is planted last week of May.
And did it get fertilizer?
Yeah, we put on 4 or 5 gallons with the drill. In fact, no, it did not get any fertilizer because we didn't have our fertilizer system set up yet. But typically we put 4 or 5 gallons of 28006. But yeah, this did not have it. We got a new drill last year, and we didn't have a fertilizer system set up.
And those cows came off the stalks with it, of these stalks?
To graze this, and they would have come off stalks. We grazed it probably the 2nd week in April.
So right up to the end.
Yeah.
What was your wheat yield like where the bus is parked?
It was particularly poor. That field would have been like 45 bushel an acre, which I can grow 100 bushel wheat in a good year here. Only done that a few times, but that kind of gives you your top end potential. So 45 is on the lower side of what we can do. APHs would be in the high 60s.
That's hardwood winter.
Yeah, hybrid.
How often do you do this in your rotation? This always comes in after corn, you say?
Yeah. So anytime we plant corn, it's always a cover crop.
So is that like every 3 years?
About every 3 years. Sometimes we just do more grazing crops too. We don't have a fixed rotation. We have a general idea of what we want to do, but we don't have like a rotation that we're tied to. If we need some more grazing, we'll do that.
You're not grazing stuff like this at frost time, are you, with prussic acid issues?
No, we had to pull off. Prussic acid will be an issue. Prussic acid is cyanide, which is a gas. And so what happens is, in a frost with the cane, it creates a field of cyanide. Like if you come out here, you're probably not going to kill yourself, but you could definitely expose yourself to cyanide just standing in it. 3 years ago, we had a frost the Tuesday after Labor Day, which is very, very early for us, about a month earlier. And we had to gather everything. We had several different groups grazing at that time, and we really didn't know the frost was coming until about 5 or 6 days out. and we went and pulled everything off. And it was pretty difficult to do. We had forgot 6 heifers like that, and they did not die, but they were not doing good. We didn't have to do anything to them, but they were out there for 3 days. Found them on the fence line, took them off, and they were fine. So you do have to pull off ahead of a frost, but yeah, you got a little bit of leniency there, I think, is what I learned. Would I risk that with several thousand? Absolutely not, but I think you. And then the other thing that my nutritionist says, everyone says you need to wait 2 weeks just to be on the safe side, but he's like, really, it's a couple days is all you really need.
Were those heifers bred, or
They would have been bred, yeah, at the time, shortbred.
or did they abort, or did they?
You know, that was before we were preg checking them, so maybe they did. I did. With those 6, we just put them on top of everything else, and after a week you can pick them out. But yeah, they very well could have aborted. Any other questions?
What's the value of your land here per acre?
Rent is it's up to like $65 an acre right now for dry
If you had
land.
to buy some though.
Oh, it'd be it's highly variable, but it'd be in the 2000s. How does that compare to your area?
Cheap.
Cheap, yeah. Pasture rent, and we'll show you guys the sandhills. That's $1,000 today, and 10 years ago it was $300. So, yeah, it is. When I do talk about our grazing system and a cover crop system, it's, and Jacob Miller would argue the opposite of this, but I'm really at an advantage of, you know, what I pay for cash rent. You know, $60 an acre for cropland rent, it's pretty affordable. You can, you know, you can try some stuff and not totally be out of your pocket if it doesn't work. Yeah, and bigger picture, I mean, you know, it's unique, and you know, you guys are here, glad you're here, but you know, you have to have cheap dryland acres, and you have to be able to manage thousands of yearlings to really do it on scale. And there's really about a few dozen places that can do it like us. So it's pretty unique that we're able to do it. And there's high, you know, these are our cross fences here, but around all of this is a few sections. It's high tensile fence around the whole thing, you know. So if they do get one of these fences down, they're kind of contained on our ground. It's really hard to do when you got a quarter here and a quarter there, and there are a lot of challenges to you know, to this sort of production system. But if it uniquely fits you, it's very much to your advantage. Last question before we go look at the prairie plot. All right, we'll load them up. That bull, we pulled the bulls at 40 days, and he's like, "You guys, I am not done. What are you doing?" Yeah. They did get the bull.
Hope they did. Good job.
They got him. Yeah. So you guys can kind of see, this is a hill that it blew every time it, you know, was windy. You're not going to raise a good crop on this hill, so, you know, we took it out, and that's alfalfa, I believe. It just happens to be flowering right now. Kind of the cool thing about this is it's kind of like the cover crop what I was talking about. I could take you guys here next year in June, and like there wouldn't even be alfalfa, it'd be some other kind of plant that would be growing. So there are typically flowers that are grown here. If we're getting rain, or even a little bit, there's some sort of plant that it's flowering at that time. And so you can come out here in April till October and kind of see flowers, which is which is kind of cool. Although it looks like it's mostly alfalfa, that's just because it happened to rain at the perfect time for alfalfa, I guess.
These were strips you put in through an NRCS program.
Yep. And then you guys can see there's a playa down there, and if you walked out into the middle of it, there would be water in it right
You
now.
keep them fenced out of these then?
Yep, we keep them fenced out.
Will they let you graze them at all?
No, the fence comes down though. I do think they see enough grazing that it aids in their health.
So you do graze it?
Never have I purposely grazed it. But
The answer
are we
is no for the
100%
video.
efficient in keeping our fences up at all times? About 80% of the time we're done.
Yeah.
Well, gates get open at
Yeah, gates get left open, and they'll be grazing that corn, and then they're gonna look over at the alfalfa, and they're gonna decide that they want to graze alfalfa that day, and those yearlings they'll get to flipping their tail, and they'll get that fence off, and you'll come out here one day, and they'll all be here.
What kind of acreage wise are these pollinator strips? They probably all vary in size.
Yeah, they're all very. It's mainly soil type, so we tried to just hit where that bottom of the hill is, because it is sand and very prone to blowing, or it was. So we just tried to hit where it was, and then that's a pretty big playa. That's probably 5 acres, I would guess. And it's just where you wouldn't ever raise a crop there because it's too low.
So is this CRP?
It is CRP wetlands program. Yeah, it's a special carve out of CRP that, and I don't know the details since my dad did it, but it is not subject. It just always is CRP. Like we never have to re-enroll it or do anything. It's just guaranteed CRP under a special carve out in the program.
So you don't have to mess with the cover on these like we talked about over here once you get it
That's correct.
established on
Yeah,
these
the
sands.
wetland. That's just like a CRP strip that goes just a mile long strip. That is CRP that we have to re-up every time. This stuff in conjunction with the wetlands is just. You're good. It's just CRP forever, basically.
Do you get payments on this ground?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Yep. Your typical CRP rate. So I think that is $50 or something like that. $50 an acre.
Is this what you call the pollinator?
Yep. And we're standing. This would be one of the worst acres on our farm in terms of yield, and this is what we took out and gave to the habitat, and it's amazing how well it does. You can tell we're dry by the plant matter, but man, if you look at the understory, there is a lot coming. You can really tell that we've been wet the last 30 days coming off of the drought. It's gonna look phenomenal. Those guys that will come out hunting, it'll be. I'm guessing they'll look pretty phenomenal with the pre-spraying.
What you said is kind of funny that one year this might have this and next year it'd be Indian
Yeah,
grass
there's
or
weeds that grow in it.
I just
I've heard people criticize the CRP because it's a bed of weeds, and you can see a pigweed right there. But I honestly don't think that if that pigweed wasn't there, I don't think I'd have any less pigweeds in my field. I don't think it helps propagate anything. I don't think there's any net negative from it.
That one right there.
Yeah, I think it's lamb's quarter.
A what?
Lamb's quarter.
No.
Good idea.
What is that you put
Yeah,
It is lamb's quarter. It doesn't look like what I think of as lamb's quarter.
Southwestern Nebraska, right?
Yeah.
It is a little different actually because
It's
leaves
not
are.
as wide as leaves.
Yeah,
Well, the leaves shrink down when they put seed on, I think, but I don't know. It could be something different.
I've never seen this much low set seed. You're in low percent area.
Yes.
They're used to the range.
No, just 10 more inches where I'm at. And we got a lot of lamb's quarter.
Homesteads on this ranch. Sherm McCoy, who was my great-great-grandfather, he had his in-laws. They homesteaded right here.
Oh, okay.
So called the work. And we have another property where he lives with his parents, and they homesteaded over there.
So you really had the 3 great-grandparents here? And the 2 sons?
Yeah, they're great, yeah. And they just came here and lived.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't pull any teams of mules or anything like that.
But he took care of them.
Yeah. Then we'll just walk a little. You can we'll be able to see into those hills if we just walk up there a little ways to the REA pool. You get a real feel for the sand. This is.
So is this where they lived? His great-grandparents, he said, homesteaded there. Be careful. It's... Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm going to try not to get anybody's rear as we're going up the hill, so just look at the sand. Pretty cool. Oh, yeah. Cool tree. I think we're going higher. Yeah. Getting your daily calisthenics in. Oh, prickly pear.
Blue grama, when you're on top of a sandhill, is unusual. So we'll grow, like see where that flat stuff is, where it's actually pretty good dirt. Like we'll typically grow blue grama where we got pretty good dirt. And all across this ranch, it's blue grama right now. I mean, it looks like we seeded it on every inch, and it was for the rains that we've got in the last 3 weeks. We got 5 inches in the last 3 weeks. It's just been perfect for the blue grama grass, because that is not supposed to grow on a sandy hillside. This is sand drop seed, and this is, again, neither of these grasses are typically important grass species. So if you guys asked me this winter, you know, what are your important grass species, I would have said by volume it is sand reed grass. By desire it is sand blue bunch grass. This is sand reed right here. So this is the most common, and prairie sand reed is a really tough grass. Before we did our rotational grazing, it was our predominant grass. It's big, deep-rooted bunch grass, and it's just tough. When we did get our rotational system grazing going, we got a lot more of the sand blue. And I don't see any sand blue here at this moment. Sand blue likes sand and seclusion. So, like, it's a perfect site, because you can see we don't have very good basal cover coming out of the drought that we've been through. But sand blue would just love this. But it's just been wild because it's just this gamma grass.
So you said your stocking rate on summer range is 10 acres per pair.
Yep, 10
That's
acres.
after calving.
That is 3 acres for calving, and then it'd be another 7 acres for the pair to get to October.
Really?
Yep, it's pretty typical.
That'd get you 5 months.
Yep, 2 months for calving, then 5 months as a pair. And it's, you know, it is sandy. I was pointing out here, and there's we have an erosion problem where that REA pole is, just because the cattle have been running up the trail here. And you know, we have spots on this ranch, and you can't really see them from right here. You can kind of look off into the distance where, and that's not our property, but there's some trailing that's going to be a problem. And what can happen over the course of a wet, this is the crazy thing about the sandhills, if you have a wet summer, the trails are going to run, and it will erode. There is literally beach sand from where we're standing, 10 feet where that bus is standing. And so what can happen is the wind, water, or any sort of event can happen, and you can lose a hill. Like, you can show up, this has happened to us, a hill this big, There was a cattle trail that went through it, and the wind is blowing the wrong way for a winter, and you can come here and it will be a blowout like that, and you have to fence it out for about 10 or 20 years for it to heal itself.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, the erosion can be pretty bad at times, and that's not terrible. But yeah, blowouts are a significant concern, and they happen. You know, there's nothing to stress over, but you basically just go fence it out for about 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and after that, it's kind of healed back up, and you can take the fence out, and the hill's gone, and the grass is just fine. Actually, kind of weird. Just a little bit other things about our grazing system. You kind of saw our fence. We put in the 3-wire high tensile fence with the fiberglass rod post. Those were put in the 90s when I was in high school. Me and many other people that worked out here putting that fence. We've got 300 miles, not 300, 200 miles of that fence. And the maintenance on it's super minimum. I think it's going to last my entire lifetime, you know, versus a barbed wire creosote post. I think it is a tenth of the time for maintenance, and I think it will last about twice as much as a typical barbed wire fence. So and the nice thing with those new fence testers, you know, it's like barbed wire, you gotta drive around the whole thing. With those new testers, you sit there and they'll tell you how hot it is, and it tells you if you have a fault down the road, so you don't even need to ride the lines a lot of the time. So we put that all of that in, and the pasture that we're in right now, it is kind of sized funnily because we fenced in that good ground with kind of this the hillier stuff. That could be farmed right there. It's just not a true quarter, and in this part of the world, if it's not a true quarter and it's not irrigated, people generally won't bother with it. And it grows, yeah. We get some good out of it, but we'll graze this pasture. This pasture would have been grazed with those H1s that we saw. 1,000 of them would have hit this pasture. Let's just call this 200 acres. They were here for 5 days in early June, and it has not been grazed yet. So the recovery, you know, up until the last 3 weeks, we were not in a drought, but we were fairly dry. We were very hot, we were very windy, and we weren't getting the recovery. So like this regrowth that you see, it would not have looked that way 4 weeks ago. So this blue grama that's showing up and filling it, and everything that you see right here is blue grama, like oddly, other than, you know,
How much rain you had in the last 2 weeks?
we've had not quite 5 inches, but
Last 2 weeks.
last 3 weeks we've had about 5 inches. Now before that, it was May. No, we had 3 inches. In May, June, and July, we had like 5 inches. So we had 5 inches in 3 months, and we had 5 inches in the 3 months, which is totally common from where we're at. And I imagine that
Some people call that climate change.
yeah, it's certainly been changing.
yeah. That's the safe.
So are all your perimeter fences high tensile electric?
Not all of them. We won't build any more barbed wire. So as soon as it comes out, we do put them up as high tensile. The neighbors, they've all switched over to. So it's anytime a new fence goes in, it's been high tensile. The last barbed wire fence that went in on this ranch was in '88. We ran a couple miles of interior barbed wire, and we have not built a line of barbed wire fence since then.
What are you using for chargers and stuff on your high tensile?
We normally have down there we've got an electrical location. On core stocks we need to use solars, but when we're on this ranch we just use a plug-in fencer. And
On all your
we
perimeter?
kind of have a system on all the ranches, and it takes about a year to kind of learn. But once you figure it out, it actually is really easy. We just use the switches. So you just, you know, moving cattle here is, you know, it is a lot of work getting the cattle moved and do it right. But once, you know, the water's good, the fences are good, so our guys are able to spend a lot more time with caring for cattle and not as much as I think a lot of guys are used to taking care of the fence and also the water.
That was better grass said that could be farmed. Do you manage it different, or is this all just
No,
grazed all at once?
We just grazed all as one. It's mainly because we're in a driveway to a house. If that driveway wasn't there, we would have a fence. We would have a fence along the edge of this hill so that we could manage that ground separate from this.
But you said you had 1,000 head in here.
Yeah. Those the same replacement heifers that we saw. They were in here in early June. And we will.
That is intense grazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about 200 acres though.
Yep, about 200 acres. Yep. And we will probably come back and graze this one more time after the frost in the fall with some calves. Typically, we're going to graze a pasture like this 2 times in the growing season. We just did not do that because we've been so dry. So, but now that we've got some relief, I think we're going to be set up to. I mean, that blue grama should be about that tall by frost time. So I think we'll have some pretty decent grazing. I actually really, we were originally going to go someplace else, and I scouted it. I was not expecting to climb this hill and see just blue grama grass. All I thought we'd find prairie sandreed and sand blue, but yeah, surprise, surprise. And then we have 2 watering locations in all of our pastures. We really like those tire tanks, the 12-foot tire tanks. We set them with just saccharine in the middle. They hold a lot of water, and we just drill a hole in the sidewall and run a riser through the hole. Don't bother with, it's rubber. It just fits tight enough that it just kind of seals itself. And all of the water projects that we've done in the last 5 years have been those 12, or I think they're 13-foot tire tanks. And got those when they were cheap too. They're cheaper than the steel tanks, and they last quite a bit longer. It's 2-inch pipeline running everywhere. So yeah, when we do turn cattle out into a pasture, it's just check the water. It's always on, and 98% of the time it's good to go. And turn the fences on, and 98% of the time they're good to go, and you can focus on the cattle care.
What are you using from like the 10th of April or middle April when you come off corn stalks to like native grass, warm season pasture?
We are, in a good year, we grow enough grass that we're grazing native range then. We have not done that since.
Just on stockpiled grass, you go
typically we are typically on stockpile grass, yeah. And we're going to get back to that after we kind of get healed up from 2022. This rate of it is really helping because it seems like if we're dry at all, August is just it's pretty bad. You just don't get much, and we're catching it now, which is going to set us up really nice into the fall, and hopefully we're going to carry that stockpile over. What we have been doing since we haven't been doing that is we've been grazing like those the warm season covers. We're grazing some wheat. We will grow rye and triticale as a cover crop. We don't grow it on our property, but we will rent irrigated quarters from farmers in the area. We'll grow a rye triticale mix on their irrigated ground. What works really good is I've got a couple farmers that we work with. They're harvesting potatoes about right now. They'll get started about middle of August, and they'll be done by the 1st of September. And we'll go, and we'll pay the farmer $60 per acre to rent that, just to plant that mix, and then we'll drill it, and we'll put out about an inch of water, and then we'll graze that until the first week of May. But we got to April. If you look at wine glass production system, April is the hole where you're off of your corn stalks, you're through winter, and how we get through April is something we always talk about right now because it is super critical. It's the one month where you need to plan to have something stockpiled because we don't have a feed truck or hay to come in and bail us out. So that's on Thursday. Our nutritionists will be here, and the first thing we're going to talk about is what we're doing for April of next year.
You probably have a plan A, B, and C, huh?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes we're fortunate just to have a plan B.
Okay. Yeah.
this is sand sage, sagebrush. So when it won't go north of the Platte, so it will go in. There are sandhills formations like this, and if you look at it that way, you're going to get a better feel for what Sandhills Ranch looks like. This sandhills formation will go south of the wall, the lowest hills, go Holyoke and then down to Ray. The sand, and they call them the sand sage hills. So it's a little bit different than the sand hills because they don't have the sage, but we do have the sage. A lot of guys spray out their sage, and wherever you're standing, I bet you're really close to sand sage plant. Just go look in there. Look at the grass growing under it. Like, A, it catches snow. B, because range judging you pretty frequently, you would be amazed at that root. It is a tap root, and it will go like 20 feet into the ground. I believe it pulls up nutrients and water and kind of helps the plants around them. And you might think, oh well, the cattle don't graze in there. They don't graze in the yuccas typically, but they do not mind this at all, and they will graze into this, and they'll even graze on it a little bit when it's in season. So they will get use out of the grass under there. But I think they're, in my personal opinion, they're net positive. Although, I would say that it was very typical for people to try to control it. Because look where we are right now. There's actually a lot of them, but this isn't prime pasture land where it's like, oh, we need to make sure every inch goes to grass. It's like, no, if it's growing, and keeping the wind and erosion at bay, it's doing a great job. So, and then notice that. Then go look at the good grass. It's not that much. We actually grow grass now. So the sand sage knows where it needs to grow, and I think it is there for a reason. Yeah, there's a yucca behind you guys. I don't know. You guys have yucca?
Yeah.
We'll cake our cow herd, and we do have a lot of yuccas. We're in a spot where you just can't see a lot. When we cake our cow herd, we'll run a line of cake through that yucca plant to teach that cow to stick her head in and graze it. So in the late fall, before we go to corn stalks, we'll have the white-faced cows, and they'll have green all over their white face because they've been chewing on yuccas. But you got to teach them to do it. But if you go throw a pile of cubes in there, they'll figure out how to get it out of there, and then they'll figure, oh, I can actually eat this plant. I just got to get my head in there a certain way. People spray those out too, but we try to use them for good. Same sort of root system with that. Like just see the grass growing all. The grass roots are thin, fine. They do go pretty deep on the bunch. The gamma grasses don't. They're thin, fine, and they're just all around, and they create this absorption system. And so if this thing was actually using moisture that was competing with that gamma grass, you wouldn't see that grass growing around it. It's because this thing doesn't even have root structures up here in the first few feet. Like it is 18 inches. Yeah, it is deep down in there, and it just does not compete at all. So I absolutely think it's a net benefit. Nice thing about the grass species, and again, there's not a lot of them up here to show you. They are typically bunch grasses. We don't get a lot of these short grasses. So they are typically pretty deep rooted. So they're tolerant to drought and dryness. Again, though, I just want to hit on the fact that 2022 at that 9 inches, it killed things that, it was the worst drought we've ever had, and it set us back in a way that we are not back to even yet on those bunch grasses. But with our rest system, where we're only going to be grazing this one time in the growing season and one time in the dormant season, I think we're going to give them the rest and get them coming and growing back.
Is that kind of your rotation, and all your rotation of pasture grazing is one time through,
during the growing season and really try to get everything he wants to on it
In a typical year, we'll get 2 grazings
in the growing season.
in the grazing season, but we are executing a multi-year drought plan. We to get out of a drought here, and maybe it's the same for you guys, but it's certainly true in the Sandhills. We need one. So we're slow to get into a drought too. The bunch grasses are pretty tough, but the effects can be delayed. But the same thing is true coming back. We need one good year of rain, like one good year of rain before we can go back and stock normally and get those 2-season grazing. So we've been stocked at 60% of normal since 2022. And let me summarize this to say, we're going to need to be stocked at 60% for 1 year when the rain is normal, and then it kind of just everything is good and the grass has an edge and we can go back to kind of 100%. But you got to have that 1 year where you let the grass rest and get the rain before you're good again.
This might seem a silly question. You said you had the same cattle that we just saw up here. Here. Do you walk them down there or do you truck them?
Walk them. Yep. We do a lot of cattle moves, and pairs like that. They moved 5 miles to go onto that cornfield, and we did that in 2.
Do you have to have people? You walk them down the highway or the ditch?
We own the adjoining pasture, so we do have people watch. We have people stop traffic, basically just take them across the road. But yeah, we move cattle.
And still idiots show up. Why this happened today?
No, they all stop. We put a sign out too. It says cattle crossing, and I think they kind of know. And then they can, as soon as they see the cattle, and then it takes, probably 40 seconds for them to get across the road. So it's not like, we're holding them up too bad. But we do a lot of moving of cattle, and
He makes it sound easier than it is, doesn't he?
So is there a lot of people in this area doing rotational grazing on native pasture?
I'd say, so you got Maddox Cattle Company. They're the largest ranch in southwest Nebraska. They're
Is that the one just south?
Yep. So when you guys head south, we own all the upland stuff.
Okay.
And then John Maddox, we're friends, so I'm not actually bitter about it, but he's got that nice sub-irrigated valley.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
Yeah. And you're going to be like, oh, well, this is a nice wide valley. That's amazing. Yeah. The Sandhills end like about right here. He is more into like the canyon country, and it's higher production stuff. They do rotational grazing, and we do weekly moves, so that's not too intense. Maddox would be about the same with the weekly moves on their pairs. Also big group sizes. About this, they run like 3,000 cows, and they have found, similar to us, that about 1,000 is too much. About the 700 to 800 is about the right group size for a lot of different reasons. And then Shilke's would be the ranch on your right. They're all high tensile. They probably move every other week. So what I would say is all of the ranches that are contiguous sections, all of them are doing some sort of managed grazing. I don't know anyone in southwest Nebraska that has sections together that's not doing some sort of system. But there's a lot of, there's still a lot of guys with quarters here and there, and I think if you do have a quarter over there and then a quarter over there, it's pretty difficult to do any sort of system. So I think 90% of large professionally managed ranches are doing it, but I think it's the inverse is probably true of the smaller ones, and I completely get it. If I had a quarter of grass 15 miles that direction, I don't think I could do this production system on it and justify it with the economics. So I get it. It makes sense to me.
I was talking to a guy a week ago about that, and they kind of got 2 separate locations 20 miles apart, and they'll put them on a truck and move them. And we calve in May and June, and I'm like, that don't sound like much fun.
Yeah.
Trying to move. And
probably pays for it with the grass.
Yeah.
I suppose
suppose if you do it once a year, and I've got the
yeah,
system
just
figured
yeah,
out,
that's what
just
they're
do it
doing.
once.
I would say in the sandhills, the standard production system in there is the quad, where they will split their groups, like they'll have 4 pastures, and what they'll do is they'll just hit one at a different time of the year, and that's pretty good. I think of the gains you get from rotational grazing, I think if you do the quad and you vary the time of year you're there, I think you get half the gains, you know, with significantly less work. So I get why people do that.
So like with your rotational grazing system, I take it you're probably what you like. Say you've got all your pastures marked out. What type of rotational wheel are you starting in as you exit? You know, throughout the year and start again in the following year, I guess.
Yeah, we do vary where we can. Very, very roughly, we will just swap the ranch. Like we'll calve on the south part one year and calve on the north part and switch it up that way. And then we do a plan. We do the ranch for profit where all my guys have a calendar. They don't have a calendar. They have a map that shows how many days they're supposed to get out of a pasture. They don't move on the map. They move based on the grass, but they know if we're getting a little dry and we need to do some management things. Like I was supposed to get a week out of this, and it's day 5.5, and I think we're going to need to move them. And we're changing the plan. But yeah, we plan everything out. And the nice thing with yearlings is, you can, if there's a pasture over there that it rained over there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's best to go over there. With yearlings, you can go over there. With pairs, might take you a week to get there.
So everything's pretty well connected for the most part.
Yeah, we've got 3 ranches that are all contiguous. So, and we're very blessed with that. I think that.
So are you spread out east to west away, north to south,
yeah,
or both?
It is east to west, quite a ways.
Do you shoot for a number of paddocks, like to make the system work right, or is it just based on like size of the ranch of that section, I guess you'd say, or that part?
I do think that if you want to be really darn good, and you can be like, hey, what am I? I'm managing cattle and grass this year. That's all I'm doing. I think if you get to like into the 20s is the best. And now that is, I get why not everyone has 20 paddocks per herd. It just makes total sense. You can't, a lot of guys can't be like, oh yeah, I can't wake up Monday and go tend to the cows and do all that. I think that 8 would be about the minimum for doing a pretty darn good job. And then I think once you get to like 21 plus is when you are killing it and you see rapid succession of common species. Because with 21 paddocks with a rest system like we've had, that would mean you're on there for like 4 days. And Jim Garrish says early in his career, he said a week was about the right time to move them, and later in his career he is certain that it's 5 days. So if you're in a paddock for more than 5 days, you are causing some damage because you're getting that second bite on some of those plants. We're not to 5 days yet. We're generally about a week, which is the old system, but trying to improve what you have to do.
Do you know what the stocking rate would be if you didn't have any rotational grazing at all?
Yeah, the NRCS recommends 1/2 AUM per acre, which
More?
for one animal unit. So one dry cow. We get roughly, and we haven't got this, but we get roughly double that in an average year. So 1 AUM harvested per acre. Very simply, an AUM is a hay bale, basically, worth of forage. So the NRCS would say you get, on 1 acre of Sandhills Range, harvest 1/2 of a hay bale, and we get 1 hay bale per acre. So it's pretty low productive. That kind of puts it into perspective for you guys. It's pretty low productive ground. And if you hate it, you would get 2 bales an acre. Because you'd be taking everything. questions?
Is soil organic matter from the farm ground to the range ground similar?
It
Or
is.
is it higher?
It's higher in the farm ground. Yeah. I was very surprised when I came back and kind of got into soil health and all that. I thought, my family's been farming that ground conventionally for, 100 years. And then, slowly starting to improve for about 30. And I thought we farmed all that out. But it's just more productive ground. It's more forgiving. Soil organic matter right where I'm standing would be a sub 1. And it'd be half. If it was continuously grazed, it'd be half the soil organic matter. But I was very surprised. That's a really good question because I thought, for sure where, it's been undisturbed for however long, surely it was good. I will tell you this though, I obviously wasn't here when, they started ranching it, but people have told me don't call this native range because it's been altered. At times it's been overgrazed. And when my great-great-grandfather showed up here, he was able to make a house out of grass. Right. So you guys need to make a house out of this sod you're standing on right now. You're not going to be able to make a house. So I do. The more intelligent answer is I do think it has been degraded in our grazing system, and we're just trying to very slowly get it back to what it was.
Right. Like the ground down there that could be farmed, would it be higher than the farm ground, or would that still be true for that bottom ground?
It'd be about equal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've done all those tests, and I'll tell you that and people do ask, if you guys are too nice to ask. I thought, so we've been no-till for like 12 years. We were minimum till before that. We did one tillage pass every 3 years. We've been doing cover crops and grazing for like 8. I really thought I would be able to double my soil organic matter, and not just for the bragging rights that I doubled my soil organic matter, but all of the good things that come with it. The lack of weed pressure, that you can run even less fertilizer than we're running. Where you really have you have an ally there with you, and it's been kind of frustrating, personally, that it hasn't gotten much better, and that the drought took back half of our gains. And one thing, and I'm kind of in my farmland decade. I'm a little bit more. I've got 2 pretty good guys working on the ranch. I'm kind of I've been thinking about the farm ground more than the range ground, and I hope in 10 years that I can double my soil organic matter. And I just don't know. I hope when you guys come back in 10 years, I'm like, yeah, I doubled it. And it was dry back then too, but I still doubled it because we did this thing, this thing, this thing. I just don't know what those 3 things are yet. Yeah. So I'm in. It's a work in progress. Is what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of places that you guys could go to that are leaps and bounds ahead of where we are, but we're in the process.
Yeah.
You said you won't graze, or you won't grow rye on your ground, right? Why is that?
That's just because I really like the ability. We will graze out wheat. I have planted a bunch of wheat for graze out. What was it? There was one year where wheat went, like, after drilling, wheat went up like $2, and we had a bunch of graze out wheat that we took to grain, and it was a great year. So the main reason I like to grow wheat is I think rye's a little better for sure. And when we go rent just for grazing, I think it's better, but I think it's like 20% better, 15 to 20% better than hard red winter wheat. And I just want that option to take it to grain. And 90% of the time we end up taking it to grain. And that residue here where we are, this is a small tangent, I won't be too far. And I think it's maybe different from your guys' management. We really need the residue. It's very important. We blow. So we had dust storms in 2022. Like the real ones. Do you guys have that?
No, like you.
Yeah, I mean, you would watch them come in, and I mean, it was like, I never thought I'd ever see anything like it, but I mean, it was like up to that cloud, and you would see it coming in. You'd have to run in, and you know, good ground blew, you know, bad ground blew bad. We're really on the edge of where you can farm. I mean, we really are. If you go into Colorado, another 100 miles, there is no more farm ground. It is dryland farmland. It is done. So we are really on the edge of where you can dryland farm, and the residue is such an asset for us for wind reduction, water retention, weed reduction, you know, all of those things. And I think you go 100 miles to the east, I think it's different. And so when we grow that wheat, it is good for creating a lot of residue. He's got it figured out. That's my neighbor.
Fairway driveway.
Yeah, well, we're on my property, but his driveway.
Yeah.
So yeah, residue is just such an important part of what we do, and wheat produces the most residue per bushel of grain production. So, and if you Google that, there's a little bit more to it. I don't know all why that is or anything, but like you guys, so that was a 45 bushel wheat field that we drove in, and if it was a 45 bushel cornfield, I'd be worried about blowing and having some trouble. And that is why we typically grow cover crops after the corn crop, is to kind of get the residue going and moving for us again.
Do you guys use any controlled burns in your range management at all, or do any of that?
We don't. I helped out with Maddox's, did one this spring. Helped out, but they're a little bit more canyony. I don't think yet that on these sand hills like this that we're going to need to do it, but it could change.
You don't have the woody encroachment up here.
We don't, but it's literally just about
right
50
there.
miles. It's 50 miles away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be coming on us, but you know, I was talking to some of you guys. Something's changed, and they are showing up now.
All your water systems, are they by electric pump or solar on everything?
Everything's electric, and it's sand, so we just run pipeline everywhere. So we've got.
Are you able to just rip that in, or you have to trench it at all?
We used to trench it, but now there's a guy that comes out of the sand hills. He takes 2 tractors, and he'll trench, and they'll get all the PVC ready the day before. They'll trench 4 miles in a day.
Really?
Yeah, one tractor's pulling another tractor, and they've got a shank that's 4 feet down, and they just go. It's pretty cool to watch. They just got that figured out about 10 years ago. They used to have to trench it. We have 120 stock tanks, and probably, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 50 miles of pipeline going everywhere.
You said on your film those you come up through the sidewall that's sitting on the ground as opposed to the center?
Yeah.
Then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's less.
So what are you using for floats in that?
Just a standard float system. There's a guy who makes it locally, but it's the same as all the others. It's just there's a Freon jug that when it goes up, it just shuts off the water. When the Freon jug goes down, it turns the water back on. And we just leave them on all the time. You know, 95% of the time they're good. You don't need to do anything to them.
Don't have to worry about them in the winter. Do you drain them out?
We don't drain them out in the winter, but we do shut off all the wells.
You try to let them drain them down?
No, we don't have any trouble with it. Some guys say that it'll be an ice block and it'll like turn it around.
Yeah, and mess with that stuff.
But it hasn't been an issue for us. So we just shut off the wells, and the deer do drink them down a little bit, but you never. I mean, it's of the 120 tanks, it might be 1 or 2. You know, that you have to go do something with. You just go fix it. Well, time to hit the road back to Kansas.